at Appraise. In the previous events, we've discussed how products are built, how PMs are hired at tech unicorns in India and abroad, and how you can grow fast in your PM career. Today, our conversation is going to be about how to break into fintech at some of the hottest startups and how products are built there. The core of the topic is going to be about how to think, how fintechs are somewhat special. What kind of skill set does it take to, grow and learn at fintechs? We have some of the experts here to tell us everything about it. On our panel, we have folks that are product leaders from India's leading fintech unicorns. They've had experience building 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and products at scale. So it's going to be fascinating to kind of hear the breadth of experience that we have here. We'll be opening up the floor to questions in the last segment of the session. So just kind of hold on to it. The last 20 minutes, we'll try to address as many questions as we can. If we can't, we'll also kind of drop Twitter handles of the folks here. You can probably reach out to them and get more insights into it. So without further ado, I'll just start with introductions. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Mona, and I'm the founder at Appraise. Prior to this, I was at Airbnb for 7 years. I have always been at the intersection of consumer tech startups and love solving problems at the intersection of user behavior and technology. That's something that's always excited me. At Appraise, we're grooming product managers with a 16-week program to land better jobs in our tech ecosystem. I think most of the exciting opportunities as well as growth, if people are looking for faster growth, I feel like tech ecosystem is a place to be. While it is the place to be, it also feels very intimidating on how to become a part of it. And the entire purpose of Appraise is to make that possible for you guys. And along the same lines is why we started this series, is to expedite the learning process. Because when you learn from the best, you learn fast. You kind of skip cycles of some things that we think is kind of learn from folks that have experienced it before and try to not reinvent the wheel. That is the whole mission and the purpose of starting Raise the Bar and finding folks that have experience before, share their learning, share their insights, and hopefully the 1 hour we spend in the weekend thinking about a career, we can make the most of it. So that's why we started this. We have 3 panelists today. I'll start with Rahul first. Rahul is currently building product, is part of the product and business leadership team at Cred. He is an ex-founder. He was a founder at Eclo and a startup enthusiast with lots of background in product and strategy across different startups like Features, Locus, Bike Ninja. He's had experience of building and scaling businesses across big corporations as well as early stage startups. So super excited to have you, Rahul. Cred has grown. I don't know what the multiple is, 5x, 10x, 20x, 50x from when Rahul started. So it will be very, very interesting to see and kind of learn from his experience. Next, we have Malti. Malti has been extremely kind to spend. This is actually her second event, and she's been extremely kind with her time because she has been a mentor, a guide for a lot of folks, and truly believes in giving back to the community. Especially from a product perspective, she's been mentoring a lot of different folks. She was last the director of product management at PayPal. She's currently kind of taking a little of a break and consulting with different startups as a CPO. She's part of top 100 PMs in India. Has done exceptional work in thinking about product, working in larger organizations, how to jump before from startups, helping guide startups to think through scale and problems like that. Last, we have Movin. Movin is now a founder at a fintech stealth startup. But before this, he used to be a director of product management at PhonePe. He has previously led product teams at multiple unicorns, Meesho, Ola, and in Movie. Stellar career. For the last few years has been deep in the fintech world. So super excited to learn from him as well as he starts to solve more problems in the fintech world. So super excited to have all three of you here. Thank you so much. Very kind of you to take your Saturday afternoon, the little bit of a break that everyone gets in the busy, crazy schedule to come here and share your learnings. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thanks, Mona. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Mona, for having us.
Awesome. We're gonna first question. Fintech is a very overused word, I feel. Everybody has a slightly different definition of what fintech means. It would be great if each of you can kind of define fintech in 140 characters from your lens. Like, what is fintech to you in 140 characters? Maybe Rahul, you can go first.
Okay. I think fintech for me is enabling seamless, effective, and inclusive access to financial services. And use of technology just happens to be the most proven best means of making this, doing this. So I think that's how I look at fintech. I think the power of tech is that it can democratize and automate the delivery of value in the most cost efficient manner. And hence sort of it's the buzzword is taking off because there is disruption to be made by combining tech with delivery of financial services.
Nice. What about you, Marty?
So while the fintech word itself is like just a 6-letter word, but it's a huge ecosystem in itself, right? So for me, if I have to just define it in a line, it is more in terms of very close to what Rahul said, democratizing financial freedom in a lot of different ways for our customers. So because money is something which is, definitely is very, very important and critical for all of us. And with that, a very, very critical factor that comes in is that trust. So whether it is any fintech product that we take, whether it is accounting, payroll, payments, investments, whatever we take, I think the opportunity of innovation is just humongous there because it has been one of those traditional industry, right? So I think with the opportunity is something that technology has enabled us really figure out a lot of different ways to leverage on those opportunities. So for me, fintech is a huge ecosystem in itself, which has the power to touch every single person on this planet.
Nice. Moving your thoughts.
Yeah, so according to me, fintech is basically consumer product thinking and problem solving applied to financial services to solve for three things: access, experience, and inclusion. So while I spoke about consumer, it equally applies to enterprises, businesses, and entrepreneurs and so on as well. And the kind of problems being solved there are also similar: access, experience, and inclusion. So I think while tech is a sort of important part of fintech, but ultimately the end goal is to solve for financial services. But think about it from more from a consumer's point of view than, for example, historically, financial services has been more of this is what we have, let's try to sell it. From there, going to this is what the customer wants, let's try to make it possible.
Yeah, interesting. You guys have all used the word inclusion. And I think, can we go a little bit deeper into what makes fintech special? Inclusion is one, but what is inclusion? What do you mean by inclusion? What do you mean by democratizing it? When you say we're now starting with first identifying what a user problem and then trying to see how to solve it. Fintechs have the ability to reach many people because everybody has to deal with money, right? Everyone has a money problem, and especially in India, talking about money is very it's a very sensitive topic. Most families never discuss it on a dinner table. We don't talk about retirement funds. The relationship with money is very different in India. So what makes fintech special?
I think probably I can take a stab at this first. Probably if I have to take an example, right? If I just go 15 years back, or probably even 10 years back, right? The traditional way of banking, as we all talked about, this is something that touches everybody. So consumer experience is very important. But I think when we used to think about banks, the very traditional way was that we would have to walk into a bank to do any kind of transaction. So the accessibility was probably only with the people who actually have money that is worth enough that they think needs to go to the bank. Versus there is a huge segment. You just going back to the example that you took, Mona. In India, there is a huge segment of people who were unbanked, right? I mean, they were just running on a day-to-day basis and just managed to afford a 2 square meal a day. So I think when I think of inclusion is that to be able to leverage technology where we are able to provide that kind of a access to finances to a kind of including all these different segments of people across segments, across economic levels. I think that is what is inclusion for me, truly, so that they have access to that money. They have access to that money which they deserve or they need at that point of time, at the right time, in the right channels which they can access.
I think I'll add two parts. One is obviously, I think the opportunity to create impact at scale is what makes fintech special, because as Mona just said, right, like everybody has a money problem, right? And so essentially everyone is a customer. I don't think everyone is a customer for mostly any other product or service. Also, and more in the Indian context, how fast any type of arbitrage gets nullified because of how fast Indian ecosystem is evolving on payments and fintech. I think that makes it extra special. Isn't like UPI the greatest fintech revolution ever? Almost, right? I mean, so I think in Indian context, it's very interesting to build fintech because the landscape is changing so fast, and we are at the cutting edge, I think, globally in fintech, pretty much on tech terms.
Yeah, I definitely think for all the industries, probably fintech and health tech are probably at sort of the cutting edge compared to the rest of the world. A lot of the innovation gets thought about at scale here, then people kind of think about how to piece that together for, let's say, Europe and the US or South America. Yes.
And I think as India is definitely, I would say definitely a few years ahead of many other countries in the Western world, especially in the fintech space.
What do you think? Who would you give credit for that? Like, is it the regulation? Is it the infra? Is it what has led to India becoming sort of at the forefront of innovation? When traditionally, for a lot of other sectors, it felt like it started in the West and then kind of it's adapted in the East.
I'll take a stab at that.
Yeah.
So I think a couple of reasons that come to mind. One, the regulator is definitely deserving of a big piece of credit for this, because there are all sorts of regulators on the spectrum globally. One that is too conservative, one that is too aggressive or too risk-taking. I think the Indian regulator is somewhere in the middle. We're quite conservative most of the times, but at the same time, we've also allowed for progress to happen where it is really required and critical. So UPI being one example. So, and that brings me to the second reason that I think, especially if I think about UPI and probably true about several other things also, that a lot of ex-entrepreneurs or people who have done really well in their first, company, people like Nandan Nilekani, Sharad Sharma and all have actually come together and are actually building a bridge between the entrepreneurs of today in the private sector versus the government and regulation. So that bridge is basically NPCI and UPI. And I think the presence of that ecosystem is unique to India, where these people are willing to listen to both ends and understand both sides, and hence are able to bring people together. Otherwise, typically in most countries, what I've seen is that the private sector is in a different world and the government sector and regulation are, many years behind. And it's very difficult for them to come to the same.
That's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah, somebody with experience who knows the nuances of what it takes to build a business at scale, guiding the regulators definitely makes a huge difference.
Also, I think nothing succeeds like success. And I think the success of UPI is now only giving us more confidence overall the ecosystem to build and replicate this in other frameworks. So the next 5-10 years are going to be probably more exciting than the last ones, because we now have a track record proven in the country that we can build innovation at scale.
Yeah. And I would also say that, the point that Movin touched upon, the timely formulation, for example, of NPCI and back in 2008, and identifying the opportunity where the private players can, partner with the government to be able to move ahead, and identifying the opportunity at scale, especially within the India market itself, has been, I would say, the move at the right time, the right set of people.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm an outsider to fintech, so I'm going to ask you lots of questions. This is kind of coming from my own curiosity, which is, you guys talked about you gave credit for innovation to partly regulators, partly some of people that are practitioners, experts in the space, involving themselves and bridging the gap between regulators and the private sector. How do you continue to innovate when you're in such a heavily regulated space, right? Also, money is so sensitive. Like, this whole thought process of like, I'm building a fintech product. How do I even test it? Like, how do I test the pipes? Because, it goes from one end to the other. The other is not, you may not own that. It's put in a bank. What is the thought process of when you start to build a 0 to 1 product? Walk us through sort of the ideation to how do you think about testing it in the market, getting validation for that idea and feeling like, okay, you're onto something special to build it at scale. Rahul, maybe you can take this. You probably very early at Cred, and the first product that you guys launched was credit card payments. So clearly moving a lot of money around. How did you know it's working? How did you know it's ready for the world? Take us through that journey.
Yeah. I think combination of two things, and more in the credit context. I think having sharp consumer insights on what is really a pain point, and I think it's now well written that start with a smaller market, solve pain for a smaller market versus trying to go wide and cover everyone on day one. So the insight that paying credit card bills is not easy for anyone with more than one credit card was sort of what led to this building, and then obviously validation with thousands of customers really on asking them this is a problem that they would like someone to solve, and would they use a product that solves this problem for them. So I actually think that's the only way, having very sharp consumer insight and then validating it with a certain set of users. And then you have to take the punt and go build and learn with scale. But I don't think like data can ever tell us what to build. I think data can help tell us
Absolutely.
whether what you're building is right or not. But yeah, I mean, it's intuition first.
So you knew the idea, you worked on the idea, so then you built something. But how did you test whether what was working or not? Because it requires movement of money, right? And then how did you know that it's ready for, let's say, Kunal tweeted it, right? Like he's like, okay, now we're ready for this. And with Kunal's following, I'm pretty sure you got like, 50,000 people showing up to your door, like the next, 10 hours. Like, how did you build that?
So I think we spoke to more than 20,000 potential customers before we launched, once via multiple surveys, offline, online, all of that, to ask if they would use a product that solves a problem of paying credit card bills. Would they like it? What would it take for them to use it and stuff? And that's what gave us the confidence that what we are building is right. This entire, on day one, we had the way to, show you your dues, send you your reminders ahead of time. And because we knew from all our research that that's a pain point, consumers forget paying their bills by a day, by a few hours. So I think a lot of that valid insights, or a lot of those consumer surveys told us that the insight is bang on, and hence we can solve for it. Of course, we evolved over time to realize what more can we do with it. But I mean, it's the thought that is this a problem, and then fine tune it to, is showing your amount important, is sending reminders important, is giving you a breakup of your statement important. So I think those came from weightage of all of that came from a lot of the surveys that we did. And yeah, I mean, at 20,000 responses, you pretty much know that the insight can't be wrong then.
Movin, what about you? You also had a very interesting journey, and now you're sort of, you've sort of thought of this problem at scale, and now you're thinking about it the 0 to 1. Walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So I think in a highly regulated industry, beyond consumer insight, which I think Rahul touched upon, which is definitely the number one important thing. Without that, you just cannot build something which people want. But once you have the insight, I think bringing stakeholders together needs empathy. So that's one thing which I've realized. I think the people at PhonePe have really practiced and done well. And I'm now trying to emulate in my startup also. I think I'll elaborate. So obviously, the financial services which you are trying to make easier or more inclusive already exist. And it's not that somebody, purposely wanted to make them non-inclusive. Just that you're trying to make them more inclusive than they were able to till now. For example, credit card bill payment already existed before credit came in, right? But because of the insights they had, they were able to build something better, which everyone wants to now use to pay their credit card bills.
Correct.
Same is the case with UPI, NEFT and all already existed. So, so one, you have consumer insight on what can make this more inclusive and easy for people to use. But the other part then becomes, in the process of actually building it, you will need bank partners, you will need regulators to say yes to something that they have so far not been okay with, and so on. So getting all of these people together needs empathy and understanding of why they have behaved the way they have till now. Why have banks not made credit card bill payment easier, for example? Why is NEFT the way it is today? And when we are trying to build UPI, how can we suddenly make it easier? Why was it not done before, right? And why does it take so many steps to make a NEFT transaction? So just understanding of that, instead of trivializing the status quo and saying that nobody had brains and that's why they did it and so on. So actually thinking that actually respecting the people who are already there, and then taking them on the journey with you and bringing them the new consumer insights and saying now let's build something new which hasn't been done before, but at the same time starting from the understanding of why it hasn't been done so far, I think really helps, because that's when partners actually come together. That's when banks will be willing to work with you, regulators will be willing to listen to you, and so on.
Yeah, that's interesting because you have so many external dependencies. So makes sense.
My experience, probably I'll bring in a very different perspective, right? Because I think for the longest time, we had these very traditional banking services, right? And where while we all always said customer is the king, but I think in the last, I would say maybe in the 1 decade or 2 decades is when we started to bring in customer centricity at the core of everything that we have started to do, right? And I think a bunch of the products that I have built or we have kind of been innovating or disrupted, over there, we already had like millions of customers or thousands of customers. So for us, a lot of trigger points to see, hey, from a backend perspective, right? We suddenly see adoption of technology, for example, for our retail customers, we see adoption of smartphones, for example. So what is that we can do to be able to cater to such heavily demanding customers much more faster, much more efficient? For a lot of different things, for example, making KYC easier. How can we do it, bring it down from, let's say, 5 days to 1 day, right? Or even coming new compliance like a video KYC, how do we make it faster? So I think regulator-led, I would say technology-led, and just the sheer competition and making sure that we are not losing our loyal customers to a competition banker or to some of these emerging even startups, right? Like, for example, let's say a neobank or others. I think that has led to a fierce amount of innovation, disruption amongst all kind of fintech players, I would say. And I'm kind of compartmentalizing here all big financial services organizations, banks, and startups, and even big payment organizations, let's say like a PayPal or an Intuit. I mean, so at scale, that has been something which has been very helpful for us to constantly experiment with our customers to say, hey, are the customers ready for it? That is more on the front end part, right? So I want to really highlight, right, a lot of innovation from a consumer perspective that needs to be supported requires a humongous amount of innovation also in the backend, right? So that all your compliances are met, so that the money is being paid on time. I mean, today, suddenly I get my IT returns probably within the very first few days of after I have filed my IT returns, which used to actually earlier take almost a year, right? So there is a humongous amount of innovation and disruption that has happened in the backend to scale up the processes and the overall efficiencies of the process itself. So I think it has been the entire value chain of making sure customer centricity is maintained across all kind of offerings that different financial services or payment fintech organizations have had. So I think that has kind of helped us scale to constantly experiment and getting those customer insight and making sure we are constantly customer focused.
Yeah, makes sense. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. Actually, one of the reasons why fintechs seem so intimidating is firstly, it deals with money. But second, it feels like there's just a lot of magic that's happening in the background that I don't maybe fully even acknowledge or understand. And to that effect, one of the constant conversations that is part of the product community is how much technical knowledge do I need to be part of fintech, right? It's one of the most commonly asked questions in every forum. Like, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to code. Like, can I be part of fintech? What's your take on it? What is the role of a PM in the fintech world? Is it mostly technical? Are there other roles that PMs can play or other skill sets that you guys look for as you're building product teams in the fintech space?
Okay. Maybe I'll take a shot at this, Mona.
Sure.
I actually don't think this is too much of technical knowledge or prior understanding is necessary. A lot of things actually eventually come down to breaking things down into first principles and then looking at the why before the what. For example, we keep talking about and hearing about the second factor authentication and 2FA and stuff, but how many PMs actually go behind the scene and understand what it is, right? I mean, it's basically a combination of something something you have, and something you are. It has to be 2 of the 3 is equal to second factor authentication. Now you can suddenly understand why OTP on a credit card payment is needed, or why UPI may MPIN, what value it adds. So I think understanding is breaking things down and really getting into the why helps solve most problems. And this is true even beyond fintech. And obviously then given fintech is heavily regulated, you have to take a more combative versus collaborative versus combative approach. Right? I mean, it's very easy to keep saying, why is this regulation? Why is this happening? But, just changing the mindset to saying, okay, if this is happening, how can we build the best experience on top of it? So
correct.
It's a combination of the two. And then obviously with work, people can build on the technical competence. Eventually it's needed to get the work done, but it's not a non-starter for sure.
Got it. What's the ideal PM persona at Cred? Like, what do you guys look for?
I think the biggest thing we look for is curiosity. It sort of goes back to everything around having more empathy, having more first principle, looking at what others are doing. So I think sort of curiosity remains the number one thing we over-index on PMs. The second being extremely high agency, because PMing role is essentially about getting things done. How do you influence without having power, influence with more persuasion? So I think that is what we will index on in a PM at Cred.
Got it. What about you, Movin? You've spent a lot of time at PhonePe and built a big team there. So, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I think for me and in general, what I saw in PhonePe is that getting people on board who hadn't solved the same problem before for the last many years was actually quite helpful. And that was one of the sort of thesis that my boss had when hiring me as well, saying, you've not done this before. And because PhonePe was the first time that I was getting into fintech. And before that, while I had some idea of financial services because that's where I started my career, but that had nothing to do with fintech. So, so I was a little puzzled as to why they're even hiring me. And he said that you're a fresh mind and you'll ask questions that we have stopped asking. So, and I saw that that actually helped me. And of course, now I'm no longer fresh. So I need to keep hiring such people from outside fintech. At the same time, there has to be a balance with people who already know stuff and will not take a long time to figure out how to get something done. But I think most of the brilliant consumer insights I've seen coming from people who have, who just recently stepped onto something and are now asking very basic questions. So that is a skill that I usually look for while hiring people.
So is technical knowledge at all important, or do you think this is something they can learn on the job, or they don't even need to?
So I think yes and no. My background in technology helps me sometimes, but mostly in getting things done. It doesn't help in generating consumer insight or bringing people together or managing stakeholders, right? It mostly helps in, for example, winning trust of the engineering team and so on, which are things that you can do otherwise also. I mean, I've seen PMs do many kinds of creative things to make sure that the engineering team likes them or likes working with them and so on, right? And being good at technology or being good at what your engineering team does is just one of those things. And there are many others. So somebody who has no background in technology, for example, might have much more empathy and might be able to actually work closely with the engineering team because they understand what are the problems that the engineering team faces, or what are the things that the engineering team really likes, how to incentivize them, how to keep them interested in work, and so on. I mean, there is an example where somebody, a PM in one of the companies that I've worked at in the last few years, used to treat the most productive engineers to samosa and kachori every few days. And I mean, that's a trivia, but at the same time, I'm trying to make a point that working with the engineering team, you'll have to find your own ways, right? And being good at what they do is just one of those ways. And in fact, it can go both ways. Sometimes the engineering team may not like you meddling in their work, and hence, if you try to be too smart as a PM at what they do, can actually backfire. And so I think, in summary, I would say being good at technology maybe will give you some advantages as a PM, but in the overall scheme of things will not really take you far. And the main thing is, being able to get consumer insights, being creative, being curious, as Rahul mentioned, and then having high agency. I think those are the things that really matter.
Yeah, I think pretty much very, very aligned, right? I mean, definitely, I mean, given that I also come from a technology background. So I think that kind of gave me a lot of edge over probably some of the other PMs who came from a pure play business. So I think the primary, I would say the trait is that the PM is somebody who should be able to tie back the business problem that we are trying to solve with the solution, and to be able to translate that into the nuances that the engineering team understands, so that the solution that they are building is kind of the right solution to be able to solve out that problem as well as to scale up for that. But at least in certain contexts, again, this is, like contextual across as you go more deeper into certain aspects, right? I mean, a lot of times having done, for example, the payment platforms in my most recent stint at PayPal, I would say many organizations, they have something like a horizontal PM versus a vertical PM, where you have a lot of core business PMs. Like, we like with Rahul and Movin, we talked about a lot of things where you're kind of core focusing on consumer insights, why we are doing it and all that. But there is a lot of heavy lifting which happens where you are kind of, working with your bank partners, you're working with your regulators, you're working with your payment processors. And in those things, you have, horizontal PMs who are working probably catering to a variety of that. Let's say somebody's catering for a BNPL product, somebody's catering for a checkout product, somebody is just catering to, let's say, a certain geography of the products, right? While there are a lot of different assets which are commonly used by these consumer-facing products. So in that context, what happens is that there are PMs who are probably handling data platform which is catering to a variety of different products. There are, like, for example, we were literally doing almost, let's say, 35 million transactions per day, and we were catering to the entire suite of PayPal products which are there. Now, at that point of time, there is a lot riding on the platform to make sure that all these millions of transactions that come in, there is minimum disruption. Because the customer is not going to wait. I mean, if I open any payment app today, if it is going to take more than 5 seconds for me to get through the payment, I'm going to get impatient. So how do you scale for that kind? For example, when you have a Diwali or when you have a festive season, suddenly your 1 million transactions become, for that one particular day, the big night sale becomes 10 million. So there is a lot that happens over there. And that is the piece which I want to come up, is that is a very important piece where you have a lot of technology stakes which are very high over there. But having a PM who kind of understands in terms of what does it mean from a technology, is able to collaborate well, is able to speak the language of the technology team, I would say the tilt is slightly, they need to definitely understand the business. They need to understand what happens if this doesn't work, what is the kind of impact this may cause. But in specifically those kind of roles, and especially think of, there are a bunch of internal tools which every single, for example, payment organization will create for their finance team, for their accounting team, for their collections team, right? So what happens this phase? So I would say contextually, Mona, for certain types of role, I do see that as much as your business nuances are important, you need to have a flair of what happens if this fails, right? So there, a good balance of technology and business becomes very critical for the PM.
Yeah, makes sense. You guys have all mentioned curiosity as one of the core traits of in the fintech world, and it seems from all the companies we work with, that seems to be a common trait across all PMs, right? We all have one favorite question we ask for identifying curiosity. Mine is typically around, what is the last new app that you worked on, or the last new product that you got excited about, just to get a sense of, how often do they check, or how recent was the most recent app they checked on, or what did they like about it. What is yours, Rahul?
I think typically I have asked people on, what was the last non-work topic that you deep dive into, explain it to me like a 5-year-old. I think that just shows, a level of curiosity beyond what typical work requires. So we come across something, read something, do we go back, Google it? And how deep do we go when we Google it?
Nice. What about you, Madhu?
Definitely, I think couple of things I would say. I definitely ask a lot of times the question that you talked about, Mona, because that just shows that are they really looking at apps? Are they really looking at, let's say, observed anything specific on a app that they regularly use, or anything? For a lot of junior PMs, for example, one of the things I ask is that, do you do like regular product teardowns? What has been your observation? And the second thing also I like to see is that I'm a very big case study fan. So pretty much when I'm doing an hiring, I love to give case studies for folks to crack. So the more somebody comes back to me saying that, hey, I'm making these kind of assumptions, I'm asking, the more the questions that they ask, I think that shows that they would like to learn more about it, go deeper. Because I think it's not very specific to fintech, but any kind of PM, as much as you're curious and as much as you need to paint the big picture, the devil's lies in the details. So the more detailed oriented you are, a more thorough job you can do.
Nice. What about you, Mohan? What's your favorite question?
I'm not telling my favorite question right now, but
Why?
then I'll have to think of one more for the next interview. So, but anyway,
what's your second favorite question?
Yeah, so second favorite I can share.
Yes.
So I usually end up asking people a few questions to understand how they are. What kind of a person they are, and curiosity is one of the parameters that I'm looking for there. Empathy and being open to feedback and a few other things are also there. But I usually ask people, what do you do on the weekends? Just as simple as that. And then if they say that I play guitar, then I'll usually ask something very deep about that. Not that I know so much about each field, but usually you can at least ask some questions that will test how much this person has actually devoted themselves to getting better at whatever they do. Then I think curiosity often is also reflected in when you work with people. How curious are you about how they feel about the work, about you, and so on? For example, as a PM, being curious about how the engineering team is perceiving you, or how the engineering team is perceiving the product roadmap, is important. And while it's not the same kind of curiosity as being curious about what the user wants, or why certain things are the way they are, but I think curiosity can still be reflected in those things. So I usually ask, I usually test people on their interpersonal understanding and how well they are aware of themselves and others. So these are a few pet questions that I like to ask.
Nice. Guys, we are going to open up the floor in a couple of minutes for questions. So please share it in chat, and we'll try to find the best questions to get them answered. I'll try to get as many answered as we can. Last question. How do you stay updated in this world? How do you upskill?
Maybe I'll go first. So I think one key thing that helps me stay updated is just having a strong network of people around me who are into something similar. So I would typically tend to spend a lot of time talking to my peers in different companies who maybe have a few years more or less of experience compared to me. And also a lot of my ex-colleagues and so on. So I typically keep in touch with the entire community. And now I'm in fintech, but you'd see me spending time with not just fintech, but other folks also, and just understanding how things are going for them. And I mean, my friends often complain that I talk too much about work, but the reason for that is just this, that I just like to stay updated and use the same time to also spend time with other humans, which obviously in today's time is super important to get out of your house and actually, catch up with some people. So I think I do a lot of that, and often also proactively reach out to people in the ecosystem who I may not have met earlier and learn from them. People who are just fresh into their career, people who have been in their career for 20 years and so on, all kinds of people. And then the other is just reading. I think over time, given the amount of stuff that I've read, probably Google has figured out what I like to read. So I think I just open my Google app every day and just look at the top 5-6 articles. And usually about half of them now are fintech, and in fact, cross-border fintech even more. So I think Google is getting better at understanding me. But I also end up reading a lot of other just articles on how global tech is evolving and so on. And then also there's a newsletter by Ben Thompson called Straight Cherry. So I also read that.
Awesome. What about you, Rahul?
I think Moin mentioned some interesting one around, obviously network and being in touch with people working at other companies building products. But also I think more specifically to fintech, I think I make it a point to use any and every new app or new product in the market, but not just use, but then discuss, brainstorm internally, with your friends, peers on what are they doing, how are they making something happen. I think that sort of triggers a thought that then lead you to down a rabbit hole and you will end up figuring something new. Also, specifically in fintech, I think people underestimate the value of reading RBI circulars. There is so much information there. It looks like a daunting task to begin with, but just reading those gives you an edge on to know what's happening and what's coming down the line.
Oh, that's awesome. What about you, Navi?
For me, again, I think reading is something, these things. But yeah, I think one thing which I wanted to talk about is that I do have some very focused, curated WhatsApp group where we have some like-minded product leaders. So where I think some of those share outs I find to be quite interesting and very relevant. So yeah, so that has been definitely a source of what comes into my feed or what comes into my WhatsApp group. Gives me the control of I can go back to those links and read about it. And I think one of the things for me has been that I have been a product manager for global products and working in large enterprises. So one of the way I have tried to keep myself relevant has been by volunteering a lot of my time in terms of the local ecosystem, which has been by mentoring startups as part of our accelerator programs, or as part of my own circle, or as part of NASSCOM Deep Tech Club, and leading NASSCOM product skills for about a year and a half gave me access to some of the fantastic product leaders across the ecosystem, especially in India, ranging from enterprise to startups. So, I mean, I definitely learn a lot through those, peers, through the startups, and through the mentorships. I mean, talking to people across age groups, across experience levels, has also been very insightful. So I would say it's not one thing that I can really pinpoint, but a mix of a lot of different things. So yeah, a lot of my time over weekend, my personal time, which I attribute as for my upskilling, is kind of I spend on this.
Nice. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to start with the first one. How hard is it to experiment given constraints of regulations? There could be a debate that the only way to go beyond the line of control and identify disruptive problems is to diversify. Any thoughts on this?
I think my take is that I don't think we are even innovating enough within the scope of regulation right now. I think the regulation has evolved. I don't think all products have done the most that can be done within the boundaries of what is allowed. So yeah, I don't think it is that much of a constraint today. And in fact, at least I've seen that whenever we try to innovate and bring up something new, I think the regulation will evolve to include it in some form or shape very soon.
Yeah. And I would say when we talk about experimentation, it is only by taking to the huge masses of the people. While, I mean, I think as part of a fintech PM or a regulated industry, that comes as part of our DNA, where we are very careful in terms of what are we showing to our customer, whether it is in the form of a messaging or a capability. But there are a variety of forms, ways, whether you do some dry tests or you kind of run surveys, where you probably don't even need to do that experimentation within the product, right? Wherein you can get feedbacks, you're able to build customer insights purely based on the data that already exists, or with a cohort of customers with whom you can have a more intimate conversations or do some dry test within certain boundaries. So I really don't think, that regulations are really derailer to do experimentations. There are a variety of ways where you can get to learn what you would like to learn.
Yeah, makes sense. We have another question, which is most of the fintech products are somewhere landing into the lending business, which banks have already been doing since ages. Is lending business the end goal for each?
I don't think so. While I've also heard this often that every company will ultimately either not survive or get into lending. But I don't agree with this. I think that lending is just one more thing. And obviously lending itself is a very big and broad space within which there are several different types of opportunities, verticals, consumer segments, and so on. But and of course, lending is a plausible end goal for several businesses that exist today, not just fintech, but non-fintech also. But I would say we cannot generalize and say that every company will ultimately need to do lending. I think there are several other business models that can be profitable, that can make significant revenues and not be doing anything related to lending. I think at the same time, obviously, within lending, there are several opportunities, particularly in a country like India, where we have only scratched the surface in terms of credit availability to individuals as well as to businesses. So I think fintech can definitely play a big role there, and there are several companies trying. So hopefully more and more happens over time. But I think when we think about lending, it is not, by the way, also not just about AI and using machine learning to lend to the people who you need to lend to, or take better underwriting decisions, but also some very basic stuff that often people neglect. For example, collections. To me, lending is more about collections than about lending itself. And that is something that a lot of people ignore. I think in India, we don't have a great collections infrastructure, for example. So, and there are a few companies working on that. So I think those are a few thoughts on lending.
Now, do you have any thoughts? Anything else you want to add to it?
No, I think Movin answered it pretty well. So nothing to add.
Got it. Got it. Cool. There's another question which says, I think along similar line, which is there is huge inclusion of through digitalization and fintech, but there's a lot of fraud and security concerns. You must have been hearing about how some people got looted on their money. I see there's a lot of improvement required. Why does the PM not include such a KPI in their roadmap?
I don't agree with that actually, because, I mean, probably for every single thing that we do, as much as we think about the positive way of influencing our users, there is always a broader perspective that a PM needs to bring in to say that, hey, can this feature which I am delivering be exploited in any ways, right? So I mean, any kind of feature, whether you talk about in lending, you're talking about payments, payroll, and I think as the positive things go up, also finding the loopholes and to be able to leverage on those time when the bug is open or the loophole is open, there are always people out there who are trying to exploit that. So as a PM, it is a very critical KPI that we have we thought through these aspects very clearly. And typically with any new feature that goes out, any new product offering that goes out, these are some very critical questions that as product leaders, we constantly question. That would be my take.
Got it. What about you, Navin? I thought you wanted to say. Rahul, you want to say something?
No, I think I agree that thinking of risk and fraud is very much part of the PM's charter, and right from the stage zero, not even wait for things to bubble out. And in fact, this is where regulation helps, right? Because if not you, someone else is thinking about the possibility of fraud. And especially on UPI, had the regulatory body not controlled fraud to the extent that they have, I think we may not be trusting UPI as much as we do today.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know, but even as somebody who's building a product in the non-fintech space, I think in every roadmap, at least products that are thought at scale and companies that are built on the foundation of trust, which is, companies like in the space of edtech or fintech. A lot of it is sort of first, people start using the product because of trust in a certain brand. Number one thing is not to break that trust. And to not break that trust, the number one thing is to make sure there's no fraud or misuse of the product. So I think it's definitely part of every roadmap. It's just there's always edge cases. And I think in fintech, it probably gets amplified because there's money involved with it. So people kind of take it very deeply to their heart. It's a very personal problem for them. There's another question, which is what is needed to transition from a PM to a product leader in one's career roadmap? How does one start moving in that direction?
I think combination of, okay, sorry.
Rahul, go ahead.
Yeah, I think combination of 4 things that will happen gradually with time, faster for some, slower for some. But I think ability to mentor PMs in your team for them to move up. I think that's when, you start becoming more senior and start leading a team of PMs. Obviously, the people leadership part of it as well, in terms of how do you run a team of a high NPS team of people where others want to work for you as a manager, as a leader. On very specific to product management, I think the specific skill set I feel is the ability to strategize and think 3 to 5 years out at least, is what I think gets people to start taking leadership roles in product. And the last one is being able to hire better than you. It's easier said than done. I think one of the biggest traits of solid product leaders that I have seen is that they're able to hire better than them and then free up their own time to do the strategizing part of work.
Nice. Moving on.
Yeah, I think the only points that I want to add are as you move from product management to product leadership, I think one key difference is that you're earlier in a silo and you think that product management and tech is sort of an end unto itself. But as you keep moving up the ladder in an organization, you actually realize that whatever you are doing somehow connects to the broader goals of the organization, and you are part of that machinery that needs to actually connect those daily actions of your team to the goals of the organization. So the clearer that connect is in your mind, and how much you can influence each team's or even your own decisions based on that connect. What does each of the small things that we are doing contribute to the overall goals of the company? And first of all, just understanding the goals of the company and then being able to translate them into action from a product perspective. I think that the better you can do that, the better a product leader you will be, and the faster you will become a product leader. So, and along with that, the other point that I wanted to make is on these same lines, being able to inspire your team. So I mean, I read somewhere, and this has stuck with me, that managing people via context is what works in product management instead of managing via control. So you should completely forget about control and not be someone who wants to control others, but rather someone who just provides context and then lets them do the best they can, right? And over time, as Rahul said, keep hiring people who are better and better, and keep them inspired, keep them happy with what they're doing, keep throwing challenges at them, and at the same time enable whenever required, but not control, because and that's the place where product is very different from several other functions, where you might need a more top-down sort of instruction routine. In product you don't. And I mean, given my personality, this really works well for me because I don't usually like to be told what to do, and similarly don't like to tell people what to do. And I think such people usually succeed in product leadership.
Nice.
I probably want to add 2 more points here, because as you kind of grow as part of your product leadership, you are kind of not very hands-on, with your day-to-day feature building. So probably there is more a secondary information and little data that you have. So as a product leader, you kind of tend to make more decisions with probably less amount of data, with the ground level data that you have. So I think developing that capability, constantly trusting on the instincts, trusting on the ecosystem, reading, and believing in the conviction, of course, by asking the right questions to your teams, is one very important aspect. And the second thing I would also say is that kind of empowering your teams to kind of go out of and kind of providing an ecosystem for them to innovate, to be able to think out of the box. And if there are very crazy ideas also, if they come up, and if you believe in their conviction, to be able to give them a forum or an opportunity to be able to at least do a POC, or to be able to give some shape to that, and removing bottlenecks for that, as I see, is also a very important role where a product leader can play for their teams.
Nice. There's one interesting question. We'll take 2 more questions, and I think that will be the end of the event, but we'll try to answer the others via email. There's a question about companies do seem to care about gender, but the gender skew of users is grossly weighted in the favor of male users, especially I think in the fintech world. But don't seem to have KPIs, customer insights, or active initiatives to level that and bring more women into the active user segments. Any thoughts on that?
Maybe I'll go first. So I think, yes, it is unfortunate that in a lot of spaces in India, the skew is definitely towards male. But I think I have definitely seen some encouraging attempts to fix that, and to make sure that there is enough product thinking going into making it inclusive for all genders, or particularly thinking about each gender and saying what will work well for this gender. I'll give you an example. So in UPI, there is this new product, which I don't know where it is right now, given it's been a few months since I left PhonePe. But I'm pretty sure it's going to get launched at some point, if not already, which is, those who do not have a debit card should still be able to use UPI. Otherwise, to set up UPI on your phone, you need a debit card, because the last 6 digits of the debit card need to be entered somewhere while onboarding on any UPI app. So NPCI and PhonePe, Google Pay, everyone were working on a product which will eliminate this need, and you might be able to use your Aadhaar card for this. So, and this is one of those things which, while it doesn't say that it's only a feature available to women or only available to a particular gender, but is definitely going to open the gates for genders which earlier found it difficult. For example, a lot of women do not have plastic cards in India and might have only those Jan Dhan accounts which do not come with plastic cards. So this enables accessibility of UPI for them, and I think so. This is just one example, but I think overall there are definitely companies and PMs who are thinking about this. It will be a matter of time before we can actually sort of confidently say that we've done enough. Today, I don't think we have.
Yes, but I think if there's any hope of better inclusion, I think fintech is that hope. The irony of fintech is, as I say, people who don't need the money find it very, very easy to get the money, and the people that need it find it hard to get it. But I think if there was, the one that I'm most sounds like the most promising way to kind of beat that chicken and egg problem is, I think, fintech. As more consumer behavior insights, all that kind of gets fairly advanced, I think. Hopefully more women get included.
To that also, Mona, because I think in our regular this things, I mean, even in probably a working woman, the financial literacy itself, that ratio itself is kind of very, very less, right? I mean, as part of gender diversity leader, we used to get requests, can you organize financial literacy sessions exclusively for us? So I think a lot of initiatives where we have new apps like Basis and Salt, which are kind of focusing on that, I think kind of are nudging more towards that. And I think if this is all something will join the dots and come together.
Yes, fingers crossed. I'm very, very hopeful about that. This is the last question. This question is for you, Rahul. I think you have gotten typed like 100 times in the chat inbox. What was the customer insight to build Cred Mint, and what was the intuition to build it?
Yeah, I think the fact that users in India love the promise of a fixed return, and fixed deposits or FD is by far the most successful, or rather the most used investment product, is the insight that a product with better returns, which are more assured, will work for a large audience base.
All right, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to get the absolute last question now while I have you. What's your insight on the next decade for fintech?
That's a tough one, given how fast fintech is changing.
Yes.
But I think we'll see a disruption in pretty much every space, right from banking to credit to investment. I would think every 70-80% of things would move to online with some offline touch points. Offline won't be killed, but will be largely online first, tech first world. The important thing is, what I'm noticing is that there's an entire generation of, say, the 21 to 23, 24-year-olds now who would not have, who will never engage with one of the previous decades or the more conventional fintech firms ever. They will start with the new age fintech firms, and all their products will be catered from that set of audiences. So I think that world 10 years later will largely be reflective of a set of people who don't know what these old banks and were even like. They would not have the need to interact with them ever in their lifetime.
I wanted to add one point. I think I feel that just like UPI and a few other things have recently disrupted fintech for consumer, I'm hoping as well as trying that we are also able to bring the same sort of experience and revolution to fintech for businesses, and particularly small and medium businesses, which is where India is unique from most other countries. And if you are able to do something like that for businesses, I think that just means that there is much more progress that can happen, and the average small business person can actually do much more with their money.
Yeah. I probably have two more points. One is that I think so far, while we saw a lot of disruption in the lending and the banking space, I think one space which I definitely see more thing coming is probably insurance, right? Because there has not so much that has happened in the past, but we definitely see more and more happening in the insurance space. And the second thing I would think is that I think just that the pace of digital transformation in a lot of these traditional banking services is kind of pacing up really, really fast. So I'm just hoping that, you know, they kind of are going to be a lot of changes in that experience and in that space, both across business as well as for retail.
What about crypto? Is crypto part of this fintech revolution or not?
I think I would say this is definitely going to evolve very fast, but which way it will go, I think different economies are reacting differently to it. So that's more a wait and watch.
Got it. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining in. Guys, for some of you who've asked questions here related to career choices, how do you break into PMs? How do you transition? How do you know what you're good at, what you're not good at? We'll send a detailed email with some insights gathered from this talk and also from other leaders. We had covered some of those topics through the conversation, so I try to use the time for the folks here to get through more unique questions here. But thank you so much for joining in, and we're going to have our fifth event, which is actually a quick shot. We'll send out a flyer, but it's going to be a masterclass on a very amazing space. So stay tuned, and thank you so much again for joining in. Have a good weekend, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mona.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for having
Mona.
us.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.